7.38 million vehicles were imported and sold in the United States last year. You're going to put a 25% tariff on 7.38 million vehicles. How much capacity do they have to bring production back into the United States? The president says, well, there's some places that only have 60% capacity. It's not as simple as just flipping a switch, but there's no doubt this is going to be a huge hit for the auto industry. Mary, I know you don't know exactly what's going to happen with tariffs, but two questions here. One, have you had a conversation with President Trump since he's taken office? And two, if tariffs are put in place to increase what is paid for a vehicle built in Mexico or built in Canada and brought here to the U.S., how much of that would you be able to pass along to the customer, or how much would you have to eat? With the Trump tariffs in full swing, General Motors might be making a major shift that could affect you. This move could result in a change in the prices of GM vehicles and the relocation of GM plants. Since the announcement and implementation of the tariffs, American automakers have been the center of attention. They have begun making moves to mitigate the effect of the tariffs on their businesses. Foremost among these automakers is General Motors. With their CEO in the front line of action, they could just find a way around reducing the effect of the tariffs. Let's consider what moves General Motors have made that sparked discussions. General Motors, through its CEO Mary Barra, said that they have contingency plans in place for the tariffs levied on auto parts and vehicles coming into the United States from the two neighboring countries. At the Wolfe Research Investment Conference, she mentioned that the plan includes potentially avoiding short-term impacts of between 30% and 50% of the additional costs without deploying any capital. While she emphasized the short-term mitigation strategies set to be put in place, GM's chief finance officer Paul Jacobson had something to say on the long-term strategies that GM is working on. He added that the company could take additional measures to mitigate the effect of these tariffs, such as shifting production of parts or vehicles. This public address by CEO Mary Barra and CFO Paul Jacobson was needed because investors had already begun pulling out of General Motors stocks. In fact, the comments have provided detailed information on how GM believes it could reduce the impact of tariffs after investor concerns about the issue weren't addressed during the automaker's quarterly earnings call, which resulted in sending the company's stock down by 8%. In addition, this reaction by GM top officials has been observed to be in contrast to fellow American manufacturer Ford. Recall that Ford CEO Jim Farley, in response to the tariff announcement, stated that Trump's tariffs, whether implemented or threatened, are causing chaos for the U.S. automotive industry. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel with the bell notification turned on for more videos. In his words, Farley said regarding the tariffs announcement, "So far, what we're seeing is a lot of costs and a lot of chaos." He also said regarding the long-term impact that the 25% tariff across the Mexico and Canada borders would blow a hole in the U.S. industry that has never been seen before for steel and aluminum, which are critical to the U.S. auto industry. Mary Barra said that General Motors is still studying the impact of steel and aluminum tariffs. However, she admitted that the company does source a significant amount of steel and aluminum from the United States. She also stated that for the short term, General Motors has secured fixed pricing. As a result, the cost of sourcing these materials could remain the same, further lessening the impact of the tariffs for the short term. The contrasting views and debates between Ford and GM suggest that tariffs are capable of bringing unpredictability and fluctuations in the American auto market. For now, nothing is guaranteed, and that's why GM is taking the lead in bringing about a resolution. One way they've done this is by organizing meetings with President Donald Trump. General Motors meeting with Donald Trump. The predicted crippling effect on America's auto industry has triggered several actions by auto industry stakeholders. Many stakeholders have held press conferences and interviews to voice out concerns about the impact that the imposition of this tariff could have on the U.S. economy. Some of these effects include rising costs and further decline in the global auto industry. All of these concerns forced senior officials of GM to hold a meeting with the White House. At the meeting with President Donald Trump, General Motors CEO opened up on their investment plans. However, in defense, Donald Trump and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said that the purpose of this move was to ensure that more assembly and production plants return to the United States. Recall that before this meeting, Donald Trump had issued an exemption for automakers from being impacted by the 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico imports. The exemption was made after Donald Trump engaged in a telephone call with senior officials of the big three automakers in Detroit. President Donald Trump gave another hint of the meeting with Mary Barra. He mentioned to reporters that Mary Barra's General Motors wanted to invest $60 billion in the U.S. manufacturing industry. However, the period over which any new spending may occur is unclear. What is clear is that American automakers like General Motors have told the White House they need certainty about policies on tariffs and vehicle emissions before they can make significant changes in North American investment plans. Even with the tariffs, General Motors has said that just like Donald Trump, they share the same goals. According to a General Motors spokesperson who commented on the meeting, GM shares President Trump's goals of a strong and competitive American manufacturing base and economy. While that didn't stop Donald Trump from imposing tariffs on steel and aluminum, these tariffs were reported to affect nearly $150 billion worth of products made from metals, especially those used in vehicle production, thus overriding the earlier exemption that was placed. Reacting to this, the American automotive, as a result, this move sparked concerns that not maintaining the exemptions could lead to added costs for suppliers in Canada and Mexico. How could tariffs affect General Motors specifically? President Donald Trump's tariffs on Canada and Mexico could see slashing profits suffered by the big three Detroit car makers. However, General Motors might be the one at the crashing end. Analysts at Barclays have taken an eagle-eyed view of the car industry and the impact of the 25% import duties that were recently announced. With 1 out of every 4 cars sold in the U.S. built in either of the two countries, they concluded that the market has underestimated just how much damage tariffs could cause, estimating at least $3,000 in added costs per vehicle. That's because designing, engineering, and developing safe and affordable cars is a difficult business with operating margins. So, such high import duties, if left in place, would make the business structurally unprofitable. As a result, it will raise the cost of building vehicles in the United States and cause an obstacle in investment in the American workforce. Most at risk from the Trump tariffs is General Motors, since over a third of their vehicles, which are sold in the United States, are built in Canada and Mexico. By comparison, electric vehicle manufacturers Tesla and Rivian would be far less affected since all their vehicles are manufactured domestically, with only some exposure coming from the component side. While at one time Tesla did have plans to build a plant in Mexico, CEO Elon Musk already flagged that construction had been delayed and would be shelved indefinitely in the event of a Trump victory. So, that has been kept under the carpet, and now the decision seems to shield them from the Canada and Mexico import tariffs. In response to these tariffs, General Motors may be forced to apply one of the strategies that they have experienced success using, and that's outsourcing. Take your mind back to 1994 when the North American Free Trade Agreement was established. This treaty allowed General Motors to freely install plants in Mexico. This was because of the relatively cheap labor costs it offered over the American labor force. Well, it seems that as years passed, General Motors has been able to expand. For example, every year it has been recorded that GM's Mexico plant is responsible for producing over 700,000 vehicles from that region. Mexico is a critical manufacturing hub for GM, with 4 production plants located in Ramos Arizpe, Salos Posse, and Tuca. These facilities produce models such as the Chevrolet Silverado, Blazer, Equinox, and GMC Sierra, along with engines and transmissions for domestic and international markets. In 2024, notable production figures included 234,681 units of the Chevrolet Equinox SUV, as well as significant volumes of the Silverado and Sierra pickup trucks. GM also led Mexico's electric vehicle production with 99,529 units, accounting for nearly 60% of the country's total EV output. Having seen all this, it's clear what the additional measures as stated by Paul Jacobson would be. Yes, and that is to relocate all plants in North America back to the United States. Of course, we know that this wouldn't just happen at the snap of a finger. Well, before the relocation takes place, the short-term mitigation approach by General Motors would be to increase production capacity in the plants located in the United States. Knowing that this would not be easy, General Motors plans to invest $59 billion in making these plans proceed faster. This move by General Motors is not going to be easy. Recall that General Motors is still on course to fully implement its electrification program, which it promised would end all gasoline-powered vehicle production. As a result, this program has eaten deep into its pockets. Now they're on another serious course to mitigate the impact of Trump tariffs. They know that if anything goes wrong in this shift, it could lead to a massive decline in General Motors' dominance. So, as the clock ticks, Every small move counts for General Motors, and they would be hoping they come out successful. Would General Motors survive this heat? Where do you see General Motors in the near future?